Hello and welcome to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Marketing Podcast, the show where we help you establish your author brand, increase the size of your audience, and sell more books. I'm Lindsay Baroker and I'm here with my two co-hosts.
I'm Jeff Poole.
And I'm Joe Lalo.
And we've got a cool guest for you today that's going to talk about some stuff that we actually haven't talked about here in almost 200 episodes yet. Our guest is Jenna Moreci, and she's a Silicon Valley native and YouTube sensation that's dominating the AuthorTube community with her straightforward and hilarious writing channel. Jenna, did you write that bio yourself?
Possibly. Maybe.
She's a lifelong storyteller specializing in crafting thrilling adventures with heaping doses of bloodshed and romance. I like it so far. She's the author of two novels, Eve, The Awakening, which she published in 2015, it looks like, and The Savior's Champion, which is more of a new release. It came out a couple months ago, April 2018. Jenna, welcome to the show. Did I get anything wrong, or is there anything that you want to fill in there?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Well, thank you for coming on. And why don't you tell us how you got into writing and publishing, and if it came before YouTube or after you jumped onto YouTube?
The beginning is kind of the same story that you hear a lot. I've enjoyed writing ever since I was a little kid. I was 6 years old, and in my first grade class, we got to write books in class. They were made out of construction paper. And from that moment forward, I was like, oh, I have found my destiny. This is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And ever since then, I was just always writing stories. I just, knew I wanted to be a novelist. And like a lot of writers growing up, there was a lot of people telling you, it's not really the most stable career. There's a lot of failure in this avenue. Maybe pursue other options. So by the time I got to college, I majored in business, and I was pursuing, my other talent, which is I'm really good at math. So I got a career in finance and started pursuing that angle. And I was doing really, really well in that venture, but I didn't enjoy it. I mean, I was a stockbroker and I would go to work, and from the moment I got there, I am just watching the clock. Like, when am I going to get home? When can I be free from this torture? And there was just a point in my career where I thought, like, this is going to be the rest of my life. I'm just going to be spending 5 days a week looking at the clock, waiting to get home, because it doesn't really matter if you're good at something if you really don't like doing it at all. So my first goal was to just kind of become a part-time writer. I was going to write on the side and one day hopefully transfer that into a full-time career. YouTube kind of came later, and it came sort of in a very odd way. While I was writing my first novel and working as a stockbroker, I was also doing critiques online for other writers, kind of to, help build my audience and get my name out there. And a lot of people that I would critique for would tell me, you're really funny, you've got a good personality, and your advice is really good. Have you ever considered making a YouTube channel? Which, I mean, I'm like a lot of writers. I'm an introvert. I have anxiety. That was the last thing I wanted to do, was put my face on YouTube and talk to a bunch of strangers. So I was like, that's very funny, but no, I would rather jump in a river of boiling snot. Like, that is just not something I'm at all interested in. And one by one, people would tell me the same thing, and I would turn them down and just be like, no, I'm just going to stay online with my blog and all that stuff, the usual stuff that a lot of writers do. But what ended up happening was my boyfriend at the time, now fiance, he actually broke his spine. He suffered a very serious accident. And in the middle of his recovery, he almost died. And I was there, I had to call 911, and it was just obviously like a really horrible experience and one of the scariest moments of my life. And you kind of don't really go through something like that and not become affected by it. Like it changes you. It kind of changes the way that you see your life. And not immediately afterward, but sometime afterward, you start to think about your own life and what you have going on. And I had quit my job in finance so that I could sign on to be his caregiver, because he broke his spine. He had to relearn to walk and all that. And I realized that I didn't really want to waste any more of my life doing things that didn't fulfill me, doing things that weren't good for me, that didn't make me happy. And if I wanted writing to be my career, I just kind of had to suck it up and take some risks and do things that probably scared me. So I started my YouTube channel while Cliff, my fiance, was still recovering from, his broken back and still relearning to walk. And it was terrifying. I really didn't want to do it. But I knew, so many people had said that I had a knack for it. I might as well give it a shot, or I will spend the rest of my life wondering if I wasted an opportunity. So I gave it a shot. And at first, no one was watching, no one cared. And then I posted a satirical video, The 9 Weird Habits of Writers, and my platform just took off and it was crazy. And I was able to make writing my full-time career after my debut novel, all because I had gained this audience through my YouTube platform, which I wasn't even going to do in the first place. So that's how it all started in a nutshell, pretty much.
Yeah, that's great that you were able to have that moment, and not spend your whole life doing it first before you look back and had regrets. Hopefully
Right.
your fiance is doing better now, and
he's doing much better. I mean, he literally broke his spine. He shattered a vertebra, so it's not something that you just bounce back from.
Right.
But he was predicted to be paralyzed from at least the knees down, most likely the waist down. He is only paralyzed now in his left foot. So best case scenario out of a worst case situation, he can walk. He's doing so much better. The doctor said his recovery was like a miracle patient. So he's doing significantly better. He still has chronic pain issues, but yeah, we're very, very proud of him.
All right. Well, that's good news. And it's good news too that you were able to make, with your first novel, to make enough that you could keep
it's crazy.
a writer.
Mm-hmm.
And for those who don't know, I guess, do you want to tell us about your YouTube channel? It's more towards writers than fans, it sounds like, but it sounds like it's kind of working. You were able to find enough readers through that.
Yeah, well, a lot of writers are readers as well, so it kind of naturally translated in that way. But basically, my channel is half kind of going through my personal writing journey, the things that I'm going through with publishing, the difficulties I'm facing, as well as just giving writing advice. And some of it is advice for the craft of writing. Some of it is marketing advice, business advice, how to handle some of the areas of, writing as a career that a lot of people don't like talking about, or you can't really find straightforward advice about. I'm a very blunt person, so I just kind of give it to you straight, and I just tell you what sucks about something and what's great about something. I break down what sucks about traditional publishing, what's great about it, what sucks about self-publishing, what's great about it. And I think that's why people appreciate my channel, is because I kind of cut the crap and I just get to the point and I keep it real and I don't sugarcoat anything. So while I'm giving advice based on my own experiences, I'm also, going through, my writing process and what I'm releasing. So I do have videos, about my books. I have videos about me and Cliff and my family and things like that. So it's kind of translated from at first just being writing centered to now being kind of like a big conglomerate or a big, mass of information. And, it's kind of, we call ourselves the cyborg army. Everyone kind of gets along, everyone's friends, and they all join me on this crazy writing adventure.
Yeah, I saw that on your Patreon page, and we'll ask you some questions about that later on too, that you have these cyborg ranks and stuff. And I was on board when I saw cyborgs. I was like, all right, excellent, she's one of us. But tell us a little bit about your books too. Like the first one looked like a standalone, and then the new one is a book one for a series?
The first one was Eve the Awakening, which was a new adult sci-fi novel. It follows, it takes place in the not so distant future and follows this girl, Eve. She is of a new race of human. They're telekinetic, they're discriminated against, and just kind of her struggles, going off to college, realizing that things are a lot more dangerous than she initially anticipated. And that was the book I was working on while I was a stockbroker. It was, my first venture into publishing. I was just hoping that it would be kind of a stepping stone to get me started in this career. I did not anticipate that my audience would rally behind me enough where I could actually make this a career. The book that I just released is a dark fantasy novel, The Savior's Champion, and it follows a man named Tobias. It takes place in a realm called Thesson. It's loosely based off of ancient Greece and Rome, and it's kind of like a cross between Spartacus, Gods of the Arena, and The Bachelorette. It follows this massive gladiatorial tournament where the men are competing and fighting against one another in order to win the hand in marriage of their holy queen, this magical queen that they call their savior. And it follows Tobias. He's one of the competitors in the tournament and all the trials and tribulations he goes through. So yeah, it's book one of a series, and I'm currently working on the companion novel, which is called The Savior's Sister. So that's been really exciting. The reception has been so positive, and things are just very crazy. There's a lot going on right now.
That sounds good. You want more than you can handle than less than you can handle, sort of.
Right.
Success is something you want in great quantities. Also, that's a heck of an elevator pitch you've got there. It's gladiators and The Bachelorette. Like,
right.
You're going to find a very wide audience. I don't know how great the cross section is, but obviously big enough since you got the reaction. But so one thing I want to know, and I know that in my situation this happens a lot. How much does your current writing project, like your current stage in writing and what you're working on, how much does that color the content of your YouTube thing? Are there going to be spoilery aspects to your YouTube channel because people watching will be like, oh, I see what's coming up next?
Not really. I basically choose, for each month, I post at least once a week, and I kind of have a system of what I try to post. I try to post a writing advice, specifically advice on the craft of writing, once a month. I try to post a satirical video a month, like the 9 Weird Habits of Writers, my least favorite cliches, something where, you can kind of commiserate with other writers and rant about the things that you don't like about the industry. I try to post one that's more about personal projects. For example, the video that will be coming out next, I listen to music while I write, so I've been posting videos where I talk about the playlists that I listened to while I was writing The Savior's Champion, things like that. And then the last video each month will usually be some kind of business-related video or a review of a platform. Like I might review Create Space or Ingram Spark or something like that. So I try to vary what I release each month, so that, because I have some people in my audience who are just there for the craft of writing, and I have some that are just there for laughing and having fun, and some that are just there for the marketing advice. So I try to give a variety each month. So there's not really any spoilers in that way, but I will give people updates regarding what I'm currently working on. That's usually more on a quarterly basis, because I will talk about, I create quarterly goals where I try to get certain things done in, my own platform and my own writing. And I will update people regarding that once every 3 months. But I don't usually give spoilers until the content of my writing. They can buy the book for that.
Well, that's it's definitely a good policy, and I admire your capacity to do so, because I can't tell you how often it will come up where I will just, oh wait, no, I probably shouldn't share this screenshot because it contains plot elements. So good for you. That's dedication that I lack.
It's really hard because I'm not good at those kind of secrets. I get really excited about all the story elements, and I want to tell everyone everything. So I can completely relate, because if I didn't have my videos scripted and planned, I would probably just be in them like, guess what, guys? I just killed this character. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. That's how I would be realistically.
I don't know. I'm still laughing over the tub of boiling snot. I'm like, tub of boiling. I go to think, what's she going to say? Water, sitting some boiling snot. I'm like, okay, that was a new one on me. But all right, you mentioned that you also do some reviews of different platforms and whatnot. Are any of those ever like user suggest or viewer suggested? Like, hey, why don't you check out this and see what you will find there? Have you ever found anything that you found surprising and really helpful?
Yeah. Actually, the most recent review I did was really surprising. I had it had been suggested to me a long time ago before I published The Savior's Champion. And people had requested that I review Create Space and Ingram Spark. And I had used Create Space before to publish Eve the Awakening. And I had heard of Ingram Spark, but I hadn't researched it enough to really have a valid opinion. So people had been requesting that I review them both. And I had just assumed I was going to use Create Space again with my next novel. And it was through people suggesting that I do this review that I researched Ingram Spark, and I ended up liking it so much that I chose to publish through them instead of Create Space. So I do listen to what my audience suggests for reviews because I'm doing this for them, you know. But that one benefited me, so thanks, guys. I mean, that worked out in my favor. But yeah, I've reviewed marketing platforms. Story Ad's another one of them. That's a platform that helps writers market their books. I really liked that one, and I have a background in business and a lot of experience with marketing, so I'm very critical of that sort of thing. So I kind of expected to go into it. I was very skeptical, I'll just put it that way. I expected to go into it and be like, it's only okay. But I actually really liked it a lot. So now I get really excited when people offer me suggestions because I found a lot of things that I would use in my personal life, and I kind of wasn't expecting that. I can be a bit of a cynic. So I was expecting to dislike a lot of platforms. I'll just put it that way.
Well, now I have to ask you the other way. Have a bunch of people said to you, oh, you really need to check this out. You're going to love it. You check it out and go like, oh my God, this sucks. I am not reviewing this or anything like that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to name anything specifically because I don't like to, you know, finger point or trash talk particular platforms unless I think that it's beneficial in some way. But there have been several platforms that I just haven't reviewed because I went to use it and I was like, this sucks. This is just not going to work. And I had nothing positive to say. And I felt like if I posted the review, it would just be me ranting about the company and having nothing nice to say. So if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all, right? So yeah, that's happened a lot, but I don't want to name names. I'm trying to be good.
You know, that's a good policy. I think I've been surprised at what a small world it is. And, you know, you don't want to burn any bridges necessarily if you don't have to. The site you mentioned, was it Story Ads? I don't think we've had anybody talk about that before. Could you mention what that is?
It's called Story Ad, STORIAD. And it's a marketing platform. Basically, I'm sure you guys know, writers, we're a very creative, artistic bunch, and not a lot of us have the business knowledge, especially when it comes to marketing their work. This was something that I felt, this is one of the reasons that I started my channel, is because I do have a lot of experience there. So I felt like I had a lot of advice to give, and I could help people out and show them, you know, how to handle the business side of it, how to handle all the marketing. And Story Ad reached out to me and were like, hey, we see that you have a background in business. You've been successful marketing your own work. Why don't you try our platform? They basically create a marketing plan that's like customizable for you. And like I said, I was skeptical, and I was kind of thinking it would be sort of like the play school version of marketing, like, you know, marketing for dummies. That's kind of what I was anticipating, but it was actually, the marketing plan it generated for me was pretty spot on to the one I had generated for myself. And so I was really, really impressed. And it was spot on, and it was something that I think you could recommend like legitimately as a professional. But at the same time, it was worded in a way where even if you're a total novice to business and marketing, it was worded in a way where you could still understand it and digest it. So I really, really liked that platform, and I appreciated that it was kind of the best of both worlds in that way. So that one was really easy for me to recommend, because marketing can make or break whether or not you sell your book. You know, it's one thing to write a good book. You have to know how to get people to buy it. So I really, really liked that platform. And I just thought it was a really easy, like quick way for writers to kind of get an upper hand, especially if they really don't know what they're doing in that regard.
All right, cool. I'll put a link to it in the show notes in case anybody can't remember or wants to check it out for themselves. I am curious because you have 2 books out. And I think most people are going to be thinking, wow, how is she making a living from that? You know, it's one thing if they're both in the top 100 on Amazon or something, but, you know, I saw that you had the Patreon page and also merchandise. Could you talk about, is it kind of a multiple streams of income that are adding up to work for you?
It's definitely multiple streams of income. I get paid through advertising on YouTube. With the first book, it was YouTube and the book that was able to make it my full-time job. It was those two in conjunction. With The Savior's Champion, it has sold way beyond my expectations. You know, I set little sales goals and whatnot, and it actually doubled my sales goal for the release week and the release month, which I'm very humbled and excited about. So with this new book, it's a little bit more like that has taken center stage in terms of our income. But yeah, it's up until that point, it was a combination of writing and YouTube mostly. The other things were added mostly as a way to kind of boost my author platform. As my channel grew, people were requesting a lot of content that I really wanted to do, but I couldn't necessarily afford. Stuff that I would need a nicer camera for, stuff that I would need lighting equipment, a microphone, things like that. So I created the Patreon page so that, you know, people could help support me and I can afford all the equipment that I would need to give them the content that they want. So through Patreon, I was able to get my mic, I was able to get my lighting. I just bought a new camera. I only got it a few days ago, so I haven't used it yet. Well, I've tinkered with it, but I haven't filmed anything with it yet. So Patreon was mostly in regard to that, supplementing my YouTube platform and taking it to the next level, basically. And merch was requested by my subscribers, so I did it. And that's been really fun too. I never thought that I would have, you know, mugs and t-shirts and stuff. These are things that were just not on my, you know, like I just didn't see it coming. And it's cool to be in a position where this is something that people, you know, explicitly request and want. So I'm very grateful to be where I'm at.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to know that people like your world and stuff enough that they want to wear like a t-shirt
Right?
of it.
It's crazy. I still can't get over it. And like I have little sayings in my videos that I didn't realize. I mean, like I just say it because that's how I talk. I didn't realize people were catching on to it and it would, you know, become a thing. And so now I have t-shirts with the sayings, and it's still mind-boggling. Like I just can't believe that this is my life and this is what I do. It's very gratifying but strange.
Now that's really awesome when you get to the point where you can just call the shots and, and do what you want. And I'm curious, for those that are thinking maybe I could try the YouTube thing too. It looked like you had like 130,000 subscribers and maybe we're getting like 10 to 30,000 views on each video. Is that right? Or I just kind of glanced at it last night.
It's a very strange range in terms of, well, it's 134,000 subscribers. And in terms of views, it depends on the content. My satirical videos always perform better. So those have up to 300,000 views. The business ones tend to perform, the least well out of all of them. And that, you know, makes sense because, you know, writers aren't usually as into the business side of things. You know, it's not really how our minds work, but I still put out the content because I think it's valuable to people. And that'll be sort of like the videos that get 10,000 views. And then the craft videos are usually somewhere in between with 30 to 70,000 views. So that's usually kind of how it breaks down.
Okay, because I think people hear that you can make a little money advertising, you know, with ads on YouTube, but you have to be like a mega hit. Like I saw something about some spider animated things that were getting $1 million a month or something with cute spider with like Puss in Boot eyes, and you're just like, okay, that's what people want. That's fine. Maybe not for me, but so I guess you don't have to tell me your numbers, but I'm just curious for people that are thinking of doing this. Is it worth, like, how long do you have to put into this, and how much is, like, you know, your personality and stuff? Do you have to be entertaining? You know, can anybody do it with time, or?
I think, well, first of all, it just kind of has to be a good fit for you. I think I see a lot of people, especially after my channel did well, I see a lot of people going on to YouTube who you can tell, and some of them have talked to me about it, that they don't want to do it. And I didn't want to do it initially, but it wasn't because, you know, I didn't think it was fun or it would be, or I didn't think I'd be bad at it. I just was, you know, anxious and nervous, and I didn't want to be judged. And I think that's a normal feeling to have, but there's a difference between that and I don't want to do it because it sounds like a total waste of time and I will hate it and be miserable. And you know what I mean? There are a lot of people I saw getting into it who were doing it because they felt like they had to. Like, this is the only way to grow my author platform. And that's not true. The reason it works for me is because, you know, I have that kind of personality, you know, I have, you know, a brand, and I'm just myself in my videos. I'm blunt and straightforward, and I'm funny, and that's how I am in my real life, you know, and I'm a writer, so I talk about writing. I mean, it's not that hard for me in terms of what I do in front of the camera. It's easy in that regard. What was hard is getting used to putting yourself out there, having your privacy kind of invaded in some ways, and editing. Editing the videos is the worst part, and it's awful. And one day I will hire someone to do that for me. But if you genuinely think that this is something that you would be interested in, and you think that, you know, you could have a knack for it, and you're willing to stick it out, because it takes a while for your channel to take off, if it ever does. I think for me, it took about 6 months before I saw any exponential growth. If you think that it's a good fit for you, then give it a shot. But if you think that you're just doing it because you have to do it to have a good author platform, or you're just going to regurgitate what's already out there, or, you know, try and be like someone else who's on YouTube, then I wouldn't bother, because the original is always going to be better than the duplicate. Just pursue the path that's going to work best for you, where you can be your authentic self. That might be in a blog, that might be in a podcast, it might be something completely different. So it's something that I would definitely recommend YouTube, but not as a kind of, you know, blanket statement. Like, not every author should do YouTube. It really has to just be a good fit for you. And sometimes you don't know until you give it a shot, which is fine. And you can try it out. And if you just don't like it, then don't do it. Try something else. But I think it's worth it personally. I mean, it helped me a lot. So.
No, and it's great that you pointed out that it's going to take a while. It's not like, oh, I got a book coming out next month, I should start a YouTube channel now to sell the book.
Yeah, I mean, I started my channel, I think a year before my first novel came out, I think. I'm not 100% sure. And by the time my novel came out, I had 9,000 subscribers, which isn't a lot in terms of YouTube. But for me, that was, you know, 8,500 more than I ever expected to get. I was just like, if I even just get over 100 subscribers, I'll feel like a success. So I never even expected to be at 9,000. That was amazing to me. But around that time, I was making money off of YouTube, and it had already gone a lot better than I had expected it to. So I definitely think, you know, it was worth it for me. I think it's worth it for a lot of people, but I think you have to be honest with yourself about whether or not this is an avenue that you think you can shine in, that you can present something different in, you know, something where you're not just regurgitating what other people are doing. And if you think you can provide value, because people aren't just going to watch because you want a YouTube channel. They're not just going to watch you talk about yourself. You have to give them a reason to show up to your channel. You have to provide value in some way, whether it's humor, information, advice, whatever. It's gotta be something for the people.
Yeah, I've definitely heard that. And also, like, a couple of my friends have taken a stab at YouTube. Some have succeeded to some degree and others haven't at all. It seems like 10,000 subscribers is right around when they started to feel like it was worth their effort too. Mm-hmm. So, which sort of leads me to my question. You talked about how this is all multiple income streams for you. Some of them, like YouTube, are going to require a tremendous amount of effort, and they've got to be, you know, constant investment into it. So it better either be a whole lot of fun or profitable. And then there's other stuff like you've got like your stuff is like Cafe Press merchandise, and that's sort of a set it up and then it just sort of takes care of itself situation. So are there any things that like, while they may not be huge earners, you still feel are worth doing because of like setting them up and then letting them go has benefits later on?
I think it depends on the size of your platform. For example, having merchandise for me, it took me a week to set up the store and to get the designs ready. And now every month I, get a paycheck and I didn't have to do anything that month. However, people are buying my merchandise because I have a large audience. So I think, the number one thing an author should focus on is, building the size of their audience, building their platform. And once you do that, just everything else becomes so much easier. Patreon is another one where I do have to work on that every month, but it's in little tiny bits and pieces. It's not something that I have to work on every single day. And, every month I get, a paycheck that I get to reinvest into my platform. But that's another thing. If, you only have 15 followers, they're not all going to contribute to your Patreon. And even if they do, that's $15 for you. So my advice is always to work on building your audience first and assume that the money's not going to come for a long time. When I was when I was writing my first novel, I had a full-time job. I was working a normal work week and I would come home and write. And I talked to a lot of people who are like, I'm quitting my job and I'm going to become a writer. And I'm like, that's great. How are you going to pay your bills? This sounds like a big mistake. So my advice would be focus on building your audience, focus on producing a good quality content both in your platform and in your writing, and just understand that it's going to be a long time before the money comes. Like I said, I did not expect my first novel to even sell that well because I only had about 9,000 subscribers on YouTube. But I would rather be in a position where I'm pleasantly surprised versus in a position where I'm expecting these great numbers and then they don't happen. And now I'm screwed and I can't pay my bills. So it's always just about building the audience, building your content, and giving yourself time for the money to come later.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's like, all this stuff is relative. So yeah, it's a little bit now, but that all scales up as your audience scales up. So it's definitely an excellent piece of advice to just like, everything is in relation to the size of your audience. So always be thinking about the size of your audience.
Exactly.
All right. So you touched on like the site like a Cafe Press or whatnot to actually create your own personalized mementos, that sort of thing there. Have you experienced like all the other ones like Dazzle and whatnot? Or is that just, you've only just targeted the one? I'm kind of curious about that.
Both my fiance and I have backgrounds in business. He's out of work right now because he still has issues with chronic pain from his broken spine. So he actually helps me a lot with my platform. We're kind of business partners in that way, and which is really, really nice. And he and I together researched all of the different merchandise platforms like Teespring, Redbubble, things like that. And we kind of fiddled with all of them, or all of the ones that came recommended, and we eventually decided on Cafe Press. And it was mostly because they had, this was a while ago, so I'm a little fuzzy on the details, but they had the widest variety of products to choose from, and the quality of them was really, really nice. And obviously with this kind of merchandise, there's a base price, which is the amount of money that the company gets to keep, and then you get to, keep additional profit from that. I think their base price was competitive with everyone else. It didn't vary that much in that regard. So it mostly came down to the quality of the merchandise itself and the different merchandise that they had available. I think the main thing we didn't like about Cafe Press is that the platform itself is a little outdated. So when you go to make your merch store, Yeah. So when you go to make your merch store, it doesn't look as pretty as the other places. The other platforms, their stores are a lot more streamlined and modern. So that for me was the biggest downfall for Cafe Press. They need to up their game. But ultimately, what I care about most is I want my subscribers and my readers to have good quality products that they can, if they get a mug, I want them to be able to put it in the dishwasher and, the image stays on. And with some of the other ones, it would flake off and things like that. And so that was kind of the biggest determiner for me.
Yeah, it's nice to see that someone else has got my same exact views on this, because I looked at all the different variety of products, and I really like what Cafe Press has. I love those, even a deck of playing cards. I can turn that into a book cover or something. Fantastically awesome. But you go to look at the overall user interface, you're like, oh man, that just stinks.
Right?
Is there a certain product you like more than the others? I'm sorry, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Do you mean like merchandise product, like that I could?
Yeah, like what's your favorite so far that you've liked using?
Well, I'm a big coffee drinker, so I really like the mugs, and those are the most fun, right? Those are the most fun for me to design. But in terms of the ones that I use the most, probably the t-shirts. It's so funny because I basically ordered a bunch of t-shirts. I order all the products so that I can test them out and make sure the quality's nice. So I have a bunch of these t-shirts and I just wear them around when I run errands, and it's so funny because I'm basically advertising myself while I walk around, and people will point to my shirt and be like, oh, the Saviors Champion, what's that? And I'm like, well, it's this amazing book. You should totally check it out. So the t-shirts probably get the most use, and the mugs probably get the most use from Cliff.
I would imagine that your listeners or readers can order mugs without having to worry if they will fit. So that must be a plus, I would think.
Right.
I'm curious, with the Patreon channel, you mentioned that it was helping to pay for your equipment, and I took a peek, and looks like you're getting over $1,000 a month from that. Is that more, are you doing stuff for the YouTube, related to the YouTube channel, or are you putting fiction and doing some things for your readers on there?
Oh, they're definitely doing some things for the readers on there. One thing that came heavily requested, which surprised me because this is something that I had always been interested in, but kind of figured that readers didn't care about, but it came requested, so I was very excited, was character artwork. A lot of people asked for portraits for the cast of the Saviors Champion because it's a very big cast. It's 35 characters. And so I was able to use Patreon funds to hire an artist to create these portraits, which I was able to use for marketing purposes and in videos and Instagram and things like that. So that was really fun for me because, obviously I need a microphone and I need lighting equipment and things like that, but that's not really fun. The portraits are very fun. The writing is my passion, and seeing my characters come to life and seeing the different sketching phases of it, that was so exciting for me. So I think that has been my favorite experience with Patreon so far. And then they get to see the portraits first because they were funding them. So I would always show them the portraits several weeks before I released them to the public. And it was just always really, really exciting for me because it's one thing to imagine the characters in your head. It's another thing to have someone able to translate them into a drawing and kind of bring them to life. That was surreal. That was so much fun.
Yeah, that's actually something I've just started doing for the series I'm working on now. And I should have done it ages before. It's just kind of hard to find an artist that you like.
Yeah.
Did you look on DeviantArt or how did you find someone?
Yeah, I looked everywhere. I actually spent several months before finally choosing someone. And the way I chose someone is I actually kind of just got frustrated, mostly because, artists and creatives, I'm trying to think of a nice way to say it. I don't think there is one. We can be kind of like a flaky bunch. And a lot of artists, we'd start talking and then weeks would go by and, oh, sorry, something came up. Weeks go by again. And it's kind of like, I'm a business lady. I got to get the show on the road. I want someone that I can depend on. So I have a blog on Tumblr, and there's lots of artists on Tumblr. So I kind of just got a little frustrated and just posted an ad on Tumblr like, hey, I am looking for an artist. This is what I want. This is the turnaround. Let me know your fees, et cetera, et cetera. And one of my readers actually contacted his friend who was an artist and sent her the ad, and she contacted me, and the rest is history. And it just went swimmingly. It went so great. Her artist name is Pocket Size Supervillain. So that's kind of like what she goes by. And she created, I didn't want the whole cast done because there are some characters that aren't as relevant until later in the series. But I got 20 of them done. And they were beautiful and amazing. And I just loved them. I love them so much.
Oh, that's really cool. And then you can use that for blog posts and advertising on Facebook if you do that too. So it's handy to have the artwork for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. And they're just so pretty.
So I'm curious with the Patreon, do you have any tips for authors that are, because you see a lot of people start and have like $5 a month pledged, and you kind of alluded to like you need to have a fan base already. Do you have any tips for people that are hoping to add that as a revenue stream and make enough to make it worth their time to post the extras and such?
Right. I think you have to be honest with yourself about what these people want. And I say that because I see a lot of Patreon pages that aren't very popular, and the rewards they're offering are things where I can see how a writer would enjoy like providing that reward, but you have to be realistic and think of it from the reader's perspective. Why are they a fan of your platform? What are they specifically interested in? And for me, it's a mix between my books and my writing advice. So, I was honest about that. And my largest Patreon tier is a critique. It's one of the most popular requests I get is, can you please read my manuscript and critique it? So that's one of my Patreon tiers because I know it's something that people wanted. Another is, a lot of my subscribers, they feel like they know me, they see me as kind of an advisor and even a friend. And so having the ability to just chat with them or have a live stream with them, that's something that came heavily requested as well. And that's something that I know I've been on YouTube for a long time, but that's something that makes me a little nervous, and it's a little nerve-wracking for me to do a live stream, with these people. But I was realistic about the fact that this is something that they've requested and they want, so I'm going to make it a Patreon tier. I think you just have to think about it from their perspective and actually give them something that they would be interested in. My $1 tier right now is bloopers for my videos, and that's something that people have explicitly requested, like, hey, can you post blooper videos, on your channel? It's like, I'll do you one better. I have bloopers every week now, but they're on Patreon. I just think that people sometimes think about what they would like to provide for other people, what they would like to talk about, and they're not really thinking about it from the consumer's perspective. Especially if you're a creator or an artist, you think a lot about what you want to create and not necessarily what people are going to pay you for. So just kind of switching that mindset does wonders and will help significantly with setting up a Patreon platform.
Yeah, that's excellent advice. I think it sort of comes hand in hand with when you become an independent author, you're your own boss, but you aren't your own boss. The customers are your boss. They're the one paying your bills.
Right.
Keep in mind. Also, I want to just second, when you were looking for a diplomatic word to describe artists and you stumbled upon flaky, I have on this show on multiple occasions used the phrase, I'm not saying artists are flaky, I'm saying it's easy to find a flaky artist. So apparently that's the official word. But
sounds good. I feel better now.
yeah. Common sentiment around here. And I guess I had a two-part question, but he answered one of them. So would you say that there is a minimum fan base that you should have before starting a Patreon? Like, can you start from scratch, or should you sort of not think about Patreon until you're further along in your journey?
I mean, it's really up to the writer in question, but I didn't consider it until I had a large fan base. But that was also for personal reasons. I felt a little uncomfortable with the idea of asking people to donate money to me. And the reason that I came around to it is because people started writing me saying, hey, I tried to find you on Patreon. Where's your page? And when I realized that people were willing and happy to do so, it kind of lessened the stigma around it, I guess. I personally don't think it would be super valuable or worth your time if you don't really have an audience yet, because the whole point is that people want to help donate to you because they like you and they want to see more of what you've got. They want to see more of what you can produce. And if people don't know you exist and have never seen anything you produce, then they're probably not going to donate to you. I wish people were that altruistic and kind, but that's not the reality we live in. So I would probably at least start building an audience first, have a few hundred people that, regularly check your content. Then maybe consider other sources like Patreon. But just in general, like I said earlier, I did not think about monetary gain in any way. At the beginning, my thoughts were mostly just, building my audience and writing good books. And I think that a lot of people kind of flip them in reverse. And I don't think that's the healthiest way to go about it.
So if someone were to come up to you and ask you about the pros and cons of Patreon, obviously we know what the pros are. Mm-hmm. What would you say the cons would be?
I don't really think there are any cons. I mean, I guess the con would be that if no one likes your stuff, then no one's going to give you any money. Like that's basically it. But it's easy to use. It's just a platform where people help support you, and help support your work. And so, it can be time consuming sometimes, especially if you have the kind of rewards that need to go out on a certain schedule. Sometimes I get nervous before live streams, because I'm an introvert. But again, that's specific to the rewards you choose. I don't really think there are really any cons, except if you go through all the trouble of creating a platform and then no one supports you, and you just got this
have you ever worried about this? Well, let's just say your Patreon gets super uber, it just blows up in popularity, and you have, like you said, you have those reviews that you offer as an incentive. And all of a sudden you realize you've got 1,000 or so of those things to do because now people have all signed up for them. Are you ever worried about something like that?
Patreon actually allows you to put a cap on certain tiers. So usually when creators reach a point where certain tiers are very popular, they'll put a cap and it'll be like only 20 for this month. And then once they hit that cap, no one else can apply for that tier. So if that point ever happens, first of all, that'd be kind of awesome. But if that point ever happens, I'll probably just put a cap on it. Also, there are a lot of people who donate just because they want to support you, and they don't even capitalize on the rewards, which was shocking to me, just because it's like, you are giving me your money. Let me do something for you, let me earn this money. But there are people who are in my critique tier who are like, I'm not even writing a book. I just really like your channel. So that's nice. Thanks. So it's crazy. I mean, I guess in that way, it's very humbling, and it's very rewarding to see that people like my platform that much, that they would do that. But I think that's another benefit of Patreon, is that sometimes I kind of created my platform under the understanding that I was trying to make it as enticing as possible so that people would want to join. But most of the people who join, they don't care about the rewards. They just really like my books, or they really like my channel, and they want to be supportive, which is really sweet. And I really appreciate it.
It's really cool too when you can, it's great to do well on Amazon with your launches and stuff, but when you can have some other sources of income that you can rely on, and I think there's probably nothing more reliable than getting paid straight by the people who love what you're doing. And, you don't have to worry about what's Amazon's algorithm doing this month.
Right, exactly. And especially because, there's pretty much, a 3-month delay. So like for the release of The Savior's Champion, it did really well and surpassed my expectations, but I'm not going to see any of that money until August or September, so it's nice having something in the meantime, pretty much.
Definitely. And then you can invest some money too back into marketing. If you did see it's doing well, you could say, oh, maybe I'll try some Amazon ads at the same time. Right. And you've already got the Patreon money to use on that. We've talked about the YouTube channel. And my dog wants to talk about it too. What else have you tried as far as marketing, and what have you found worthwhile?
Most of the marketing I've done at this point is all based on YouTube. Now that I have this big platform around YouTube, it just makes sense. So I don't have to spend a lot of money on marketing anymore, thank God, which is awesome. But another platform that I think is very helpful to writers, and there's a huge boom on it for readers and writers, is Instagram. And that's another thing, like people will get onto YouTube and say they hate being in front of a camera, but they're really artistic and creative in other ways. It's like, set up an Instagram account. There are so many people who have become popular through Instagram and have been able to segue that into a career in writing. I think the term that's really popular is Bookstagram, and people will just create these really beautiful pictures of books or their writing aesthetic and things like that. And it's a really easy way to build an audience and provide content that people are interested in. And it's clearly popular if there are so many accounts with thousands of followers just because they post pictures of pretty books. So I've done Instagram a lot, and I've really enjoyed that. I like that a lot. I've done ads and things like that in the past, like Facebook ads. I wouldn't say I'm just so on them. I thought that they helped, but not enough for me to want to try it again. I found other avenues that were cheaper or free that helped significantly more than, buying ads online. But I think my opinion, in terms of the best marketing you can do, is to kind of create an author brand. The most, successful authors and most successful books are ones where the author by name. You know that person. If you see Stephen King on a book cover, the book is probably going to be good. So I think focusing on creating a brand for yourself, it's not just about the work you put out, it's about the overall, feel, the overall aesthetic, the overall vibe. I think that is very beneficial for any business person, because whether we like it or not, the writing industry is a business, and you kind of have to think about it that way if you want to do this as a career.
Brand building is an important thing, obviously. And for authors, if you are just an author, then you can sort of focus on that, but you're an author and a YouTuber. So there's sort of different muscles you have to flex. And we talk a little bit about, like, when there's a nonfiction author on here, authority is an important thing. Like, why should people listen to you? And is that a big part of being a YouTuber too? Like, you sort of have to make it clear why people might find, why your advice being given on YouTube might be useful?
It's funny because I really thought that would be the case. That was one of the reasons that I didn't want to do YouTube in the first place, is because people who were asking me to create this advisory channel, I was writing my debut novel. No one knew who I was. And I didn't go to college for creative writing. I went to college for finance. And so when people started asking me to create this channel, I said, I have no authority here. Like, I am, there are other people out there who could probably give advice better than me. And the response I was always getting is, no, your advice is really good. And when we go to find advice online, it's flowery, or it's sugar-coated, or it's convoluted, and you are just kind of straight to the point. You make it sound simple, you break it down, and I'm motivational, I guess. I'm very motivating. And so for me, the way I kind of saw my channel and my authority was that I'm here because you guys asked me to be here. You asked for this advice, so I'm giving it to you.
Yeah, holding a gun to your head.
Right? Exactly. Like, I didn't want to be here, but I'm here now. So for me, that was very flattering, like that people trusted me that much, and that people, liked my advice, and that they liked my writing. They would say, oh, your books back up, you actually follow the advice that you give, which is very kind, and I'm glad. But when I first got on YouTube, I was like, crap, who's going to listen to me? I don't even have a book out yet. But I was surprised that people were very receptive and willing to give me a chance. And then they were all waiting for the book to come out and see, you know, like if the juice was worth the squeeze, pretty much. And so I was really excited that after my first book came out, my channel, you know, got bigger, you know, it did even better. And I think that's in part because now there was evidence that, you know, I'm not just some chick sitting in her guest room talking about writing. Like, I actually have something published, you know, I know what I'm talking about. But to be honest, even if it's to my detriment, if someone is a writer on YouTube and they are looking for writing advice, read their work. You know, there are a lot of people on YouTube who give advice. And it's not even that maybe they're not qualified, but what if this person's giving advice and it turns out their style of writing doesn't mesh with yours at all? What if this is just not your kind of writer? So I personally would recommend that everyone who looks for advice online for writing, look into the person who's giving the advice and decide whether or not you agree with their advice, you find them credible, you trust them, read some of their work. You know, even if it's my work and you don't like it, that's fine with me. I would rather you take my advice because you actually, you know, feel like I'm credible versus take it blindly, pretty much. So that would be my advice. Always be skeptical of the source.
I mean, it makes sense. If you're looking for someone to offer you writing advice, you read their book and go like, oh man alive, they need to pick up an English 101 book. Please. But,
right.
Okay, so you mentioned you try and post something on your channel once a week. So my question is, how much of your time during the week do you devote to your channel? So like some of our listeners are like, I want to get my own channel started. I wonder how much time she devotes to it. Is it worth it me to do it or not?
It's a lot of time. I mean, I know a lot of people who will tell me about how much time they spend and they're like, oh, it's just an hour. And it's like, well, your video sucks. So that's why it was just an hour. But I script my videos because I'm very long-winded. And if I don't, my videos will be a half hour long. I script my videos that, you know, can take an hour to script and refine and edit. Plus I got to do a bunch of them. So usually I'll script a bunch in one day. I film them. Just setting up for filming and filming itself is a couple hours right there. And then editing. Editing takes...
Yeah, we heard how much you enjoy doing the editing.
Right. I just love it so much. Editing takes forever. It takes hours. I would say that altogether, I probably spend 2 days a week on YouTube. So, I mean, if you think about it, if you work, you know, 5 days a week, basically my weekend is YouTube. So it's not, you know, easy to produce good content. It takes a lot of time and it's an investment of time. So it's not something to just kind of, oh, well, you know, I'll give it a shot and just post something and I'll get 1 million views. It doesn't work that way. You have to really care about what you're putting out there.
What is your average video length?
8 minutes.
8 minutes. So you're saying 2 days worth of work in preparation for an 8-minute video.
Yes.
That's dedication for you right there.
Yeah. It's a lot of work. And people don't realize when I film, the video itself is usually like 45 minutes long. And they're like, were you just rambling and going off on tangents? It's like, no, I stumble over my words. I forget what I'm going to say next. I fix my hair. I fix my makeup. I'll say the same line twice because one time I was looking stupid while I was saying it. Like it's a long process, and I'm not an actress. It's not like I could just sit in front of the camera and be dazzling and wonderful. This is not the most natural thing for me. So it takes a lot of time, and then you produce.
Or if you're middle filming, your cell phone goes off. You're like, son of a bucktooth booger.
Yeah, that actually happens a lot, and it's usually my mom, and I'm like, Mom, I'm filming. Get it together. But yeah, it's a lot of time, but it's worth it. I mean, it's worth it for me.
One good thing about it requiring time to do good videos is that there's kind of a higher barrier to entry. So I think that, that can put off a lot of people. And it's same with podcasting. It's a little more effort than just blogging. So it seems like you have less competition to actually maybe stand out, especially if you're consistent, like you are doing it every week and over years and years. It may take that time to get discovered, but, you're proof that it's worth the time in the end if you're doing a good job.
Well, that's why I got one of the reasons that kind of swayed me into it is that I was blogging beforehand, and I love writing, obviously, but I enjoy writing fiction. I don't enjoy writing blog posts. I don't enjoy writing nonfiction or about my life or about my writing process. I don't mind talking about it, but I hate writing about it. So blogging for me was such a chore, and I had been doing it for years, and I had 100 followers, 100, 200, somewhere in that range, which is nice, but I wanted a better payoff if I was going to do something that I really hated doing. And the blogging universe is so saturated. Everyone blogs. All writers blog. And then now, like, there are mommy blogs and there's makeup blogs. Everyone has a blog. So when I first was considering doing YouTube, I checked out YouTube and I looked up writers on YouTube, specifically writers who had YouTube channels about writing. And I could only find 3. And I was like, wow, this is like an untapped market. And the 3 that I did find, the next thing I did was check their comments, and I'm like, okay, are people ripping these people to shreds? Because that's what I was nervous about. You know, it's not easy being a woman on YouTube. You know, commenters, they get vicious. And the people who in the comments were so supportive and nice. And some of these YouTubers were teenagers. And I was 25 or 26 at the time. And I was like, if this 17-year-old girl has the balls to be on here on YouTube and she's giving writing advice and all these people are being so kind to her, I have no excuse, because this girl is killing it, you know, and I'm sitting here, you know, scared for my life to do this. And this teenage girl is showing me up. And like, I just, that for me was very inspiring and motivating. And then seeing that there were so few people willing to do it, I was like, well, this is an untapped market. So I might as well give it a shot, because at least here my voice will shine louder because it's not cluttered by a million other people. Now there are a lot more people, a lot more writers on YouTube than there were back then. And there's a whole community, you know, the AuthorTube community, which is really exciting, but it's still a lot less writers on YouTube than in the blogging community. So it's still unsaturated in comparison.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's like you can't find something that works without other people eventually finding it, but there are rewards if you can get in kind of early and establish yourself that way.
Right, exactly. So I think that I got in at a good time, and I'm happy that I did so. And now it's bigger, but it's not so big where if you were to join now, you'd be too late. There are some communities on YouTube where if you were to join now, it's going to be really, really hard to stand out. That's not the case. I still see people popping up on AuthorTube all the time who are really good and they're gaining followers. You know, there's definitely still room to join the family. And a lot of us, you know each other and talk to each other and help each other out. So it's cool.
All right, everybody listening, you heard that. There's no excuse for you not to be on YouTube if you are remotely interested in it.
Right. If you're interested, don't force yourself to do it if it's just not for you.
Yeah, definitely. And we're coming up on the hour, so we're just going to, I think I've got one more question, and the guys might have one more question. Okay. I wanted to ask you about pricing, because I think your recent one is $6.49, so you're a little higher than a lot of indie authors often do. Did you play around with pricing at all, or what made you decide to go a little higher?
Yeah, I think it really depends on your audience and where you stand with them. And I take this stuff very seriously. I have a background in business, so I did a lot of polling and whatnot, and asking my audience, and comparing my work to other indie authors, traditional authors, and whatnot. And based on the feedback I was receiving from my audience, at this point in my career, they were comparing my work more to traditionally published books than other indie published books. And I know $6.99 that's the price of the ebook. When I was looking at other traditionally published books in the same genre, adult fantasy, they all tended to be within that range. So it was basically just going off of what my audience was saying. When I first started, when I was new and didn't have much of an audience, my book prices were a lot cheaper to reflect that, because I'm basically just just showing up and having to prove myself. So it's kind of like, hey, I know you don't know anything about me. I know you don't know if my writing's any good. Here is a cheaper price and give it a shot. Now that I have established myself a little bit more, people were, more willing to pay a price comparable to what they would see with a traditionally published book based on my research. But it's definitely something that I recommend, doing a lot of research, talking and engaging directly with your audience, and being realistic about where you stand with them. And also, like, not being a jerk, like, just because my audience is bigger now, I'm not going to be like, okay, my ebooks are $30. You know what I mean? Like, and sometimes you see that. So just kind of be realistic about the market and where you stand in it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And my last question on that is, did you consider doing KDP Select and doing the Amazon Exclusivity Kindle Unlimited thing? Or because you had kind of a broad audience that came from elsewhere, did you just want to make sure and be in all the bookstores?
I did Amazon exclusive with my first book, and I really enjoyed it. And I do recommend that path for a new author, especially, or again, based on your audience, because there are certain genres that really excel in Amazon exclusive because the primary chunk of their audience they're all Kindle users. I use Amazon exclusive with my first book, and one of the biggest complaints I got with my first book is people were like, why isn't it on the book depository? Why isn't it at Barnes & Noble? Why can't I get it at Indigo? And so with my next book, I decided I was going to not do Amazon exclusive, because at this point, I wasn't a newbie anymore, and the demand was there and people wanted to see it elsewhere. So it was an easy decision in that way, but I don't regret starting off that way. And I think if I was writing a different genre, that might have changed my opinion about how I released my second novel. But with this particular genre and based on the feedback from my audience, it was a no-brainer.
All right. My question is going back to sort of a nuts and bolts YouTube question here.
Mm-hmm.
I watch a lot of YouTube. I follow a lot of YouTubers. Oddly enough, not really in the author realm, but a lot of them make most of their money from like sponsorships and advertising, not so much the YouTube ads, like the traffic-based ones. So
Right.
what do you like? Do you do sponsorships or anything like that, or is it all based upon the viewership?
I do sponsorships, but I'm very picky about the sponsorships I get. I'm at a point, and I'm very lucky to be here, where I get sponsorship emails almost every day from companies asking to sponsor me. And, there are YouTubers out there, and I can't blame them, who just snap them up. Everyone, yes, give me the money, because, it's hard. This is not the most lucrative profession. But for me, I think the reason my platform is so successful is because I've developed a reputation of being almost brutally honest. I've developed a reputation of keeping it real. And so if I'm going to allow a company to sponsor me, they're essentially paying you to talk about their company. And if I'm going to take that money, it's got to be a company I really like. It's got to be a company that I would talk about even if they weren't sponsoring me. So I get lots of emails, and I get lots of emails that have nothing to do with my platform. I get so many makeup sponsors, like, will you try out our contour palette? And it's like, that literally has nothing to do with what I talk about. But
I was waiting for you to say, man, that's just insulting.
I mean, like, you can give me free makeup if you want to, but I'm not talking about it on my channel. Yeah, I receive these emails a lot. I get lots of games too. People want me to try out their video games. I haven't played a video game since I was like 13. But yeah, I'm just very selective, because as much as I would love the money, money is nice. I feel like it would just be a disservice to my audience, and my numbers would probably dwindle, because people would be like, oh, well, she'll talk about any company so long as you pay her. So it means more to me that my audience can trust me. And I think that's better for my business in the long run, regardless. But I do have sponsors. And then when I select them, they are usually companies, or not usually, they're always companies that I was already using before they contacted me, or they contacted me and they gave me a test period to try them out, and I fell in love with them. That's pretty much the only way I'll even consider it, because I'm not going to lie to all these people who are the reason that I'm able to do what I love for a living. The least I can do is be honest with them and give them quality content.
So my last question for you, as I ask a lot of our guests, you have the ability to go back in time and do it again. Would you do everything the exact same way?
Let me think.
Usually those who pause and say, let me think, usually end up saying, yes, I would do it the same. Most of them, if they have a regret, they're like, oh, dude, I wish I would have done this instead of that. But
yeah. I mean, the only mistakes or hiccups I made along the way are things that I think looking back at the time, they felt like the end of the world, but looking back, they were more a product of lack of experience or a smaller size in my audience. Like, for example, with my second book release, I did way more events and interviews and marketing and all that sort of stuff. And a lot of people ask me, well, do you wish you had did this with your first book? And I'm like, well, of course, I wish I had done it with my first book, but I didn't have the ability to do so. Like, I didn't have the audience. I couldn't do the giveaways because I couldn't afford them, and I can now. So anything that I would go back and change, they are things that I literally would not have been able to change at the time. So no, I don't have any regrets. I feel very fortunate to be where I'm at now. And there's nothing that I look back at and think, oh, why did I do that? It's just, it all led to this place, and this place is really good. So I am pleased.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for all the great information. I really appreciate you're doing some stuff that's not the typical of the guests that we usually have on the show. So it was really cool to hear about that. And can you remind everyone the names of your books and where they can find you online?
Sure. My sci-fi novel is Eve the Awakening, and the book I just released is a dark fantasy called The Savior's Champion. They are both available on Amazon, but The Savior's Champion is also available on everywhere, Barnes & Noble, The Book Depository, Books A Million, etc. I am on YouTube. Just look for Jenna Moreci, JennaMoreci, and I'm also on Twitter, Instagram, got my website, Facebook, and it's all under my name, Jenna Moreci. You can find me everywhere. I am like the plague. I'm everywhere.
All right, very good. And this has been episode 187. So I will also put the links to your some of your stuff, the main ones that I can find in the show notes to your books, so people can look on there too if they're can't remember how to spell your name.
Thank you so much. I've had a great time.
Yeah, we really appreciate the information, and thanks for listening, everyone.